Book 7, the Book of Yoga, Canto 6, Nirvana and the Discovery of the All-Negating Absolute. We finished Canto 5, the Finding of the Soul, and Savitri here, as you read, is a description of Savitri finding her soul, her psychic being, and also the, what Sri Aurobindo refers to as oversoul, or the merging of the psychic with the soul, which is the mother. And through that experience, after she discovers as a self-realization, she goes to the next stage of her yoga, which is the discovery of the all-negating absolute and Nirvana. So Nirvana and the discovery of the all-negating absolute. A calm, slow sun looked down from tranquil heavens. The interesting way of describing the sun. A calm, slow sun looked down from tranquil heavens. A rooted, sullen rearguard of retreat. The last rains had fled, murmuring across the woods, or failed a sibilant whisper mid the leaves. And the great blue enchantment of the sky recovered the deep rapture of its smile. Its mellow splendor, unstressed by storm-licked heats, found room for a luxury of warm, mild days, the night's gold treasure of autumnal moons, came floating shipped through ripples of fairy air. And Savitri's life was glad, fulfilled like earth's. She had found herself, she knew her being's aim. Although her kingdom of marvelous change within remained unspoken in her secret breast, all that lived round her felt its magic's charm. The trees' rustling voices told it to the winds. Flowers spoke in ardent hues an unknown joy. The birds caroling became a canticle. The bees forgot their strife and lived at ease, absorbed in wide communion with the unseen. The mild ascetics of the wood received a sudden greatening of their lonely muse. This bright perfection of her inner state poured, overflowing into her outward scene. This bright perfection of her inner state poured, overflowing into her outward scene, made beautiful, dull, common, natural things and action wonderful and time divine. Even the smallest, meanest work became a sweet or glad and glorious sacrament, an offering to the self of the great world, or a service to the one in each and all. A light invaded all, from her being's light her heartbeats dance, communicated bliss. Happiness grew happier, shared with her. By her touch and grief some solace found when she drew near. Above the cherished head of Satyavan, she saw not now fate's dark and lethal orb. A golden circle round a mystic sun disclosed to her, newborn, predicting sight, the cyclic rondo of her sovereign life. So such was the change within Savitri. Such was her inner state of realization and communion with the soul, with the divine, in the world, in herself, in all, that she saw even above Satyavan's head. Till now you see the first half of Savitri or more. Savitri has been almost every day suffering the fate of foreknowledge, which is that she knew that Satyavan must die. And this she has kept all to herself, but it has been with her all the time. And she has seen only above Satyavan's head till now fate's dark and lethal light of darkness around him, because all she could think of is that he will leave her and he will die. But after she realizes her psychic being and her soul and the world soul and comes in touch with the Divine Mother, she now realizes and sees, even above Satyavan's head, a golden circle around a mystic sun, disclosed to her newborn predicting sight. So her sight became newborn. You see, when you see from the soul, from the state of self-realization and of knowledge and of light, then you see differently. So her own sight became new, and it disclosed to her newborn predicting sight the cyclic rondo of a sovereign life. She suddenly saw Satyavan's cyclic rondo. That means that his life is everlasting. It goes in cycles of life and death and rebirth. The cyclic rondo of a sovereign life. In her visions and deep-etched veridical dreams, in brief shiftings of the future's heavy screen, he lay not by a dolorous decree, a victim in the dismal ontur of death, or borne to blissful regions far from her, forgetting the sweetness of earth's warm delight, forgetting the passionate oneness of love's clasp, absolved in the self-wrapped immortal's bliss. So in the brief shiftings of the future's heavy screen, Savitri started getting intimations of the future, bright intimations that come from the intuitive plane, the overmind, and all these intimations told her that actually she saw that he was not bound to die, that he was not a victim of the dismal ontur of death, and that he would not be taken away from her to some heavenly bliss and there get self-wrapped in immortal bliss, but instead, always he was with her, a living soul that met her eyes with closed, enamored eyes, a living body near to her body's joy. So she began to see that actually death was not inevitable for Satyavan, that in fact he was always with her. Always he was with her, a living soul that met her eyes with closed, enamored eyes, a living body near to her body's joy. But now no longer in these great wild woods, in kinship with the days of bird and beast, and levelled to the bareness of earth's brown breast, but mid the thinking high-built lives of men, in tapestry chambers and on crystal floors, in armoured town or gardened pleasure walks, even in distance closer than her thoughts, body to body near, soul near to soul, moving as if by a common breath and will they were tied in the single circling of their days, together by love's unseen atmosphere, inseparable like the earth and sky. Thus for a while she trod the golden path. This was the sun before abysmal night. So thus for a while she trod, and she saw this wonderful golden future of Satyavan and herself, this golden path. And thus for a while she trod the golden path. This was the sun before abysmal night. This was the glimpse that the future gave to her before plunging her into abysmal night, the night of darkness, the darkness of death, which she had to now meet. Once as she sat in deep felicitous muse, still quivering from her lover's strong embrace, and made her joy a bridge twixt earth and heaven, an abyss yawned suddenly beneath her heart, a vast and nameless fear dragged at her nerves, as drags a wild beast its half-slaughtered prey. So here Sri Aurobindo is describing that once when Savitri, once as she sat in deep felicitous muse, still quivering from her lover's strong embrace, and made her joy a bridge twixt earth and heaven. An abyss yawned suddenly beneath her heart. She suddenly saw there was a deep abyss, what is an abyss? Like a kai, you can say, Yawned meaning it's opened up suddenly beneath her heart. A vast and nameless fear dragged at her nerves, as drags a wild beast its half-slaughtered prey. It seemed to have no den from which it sprang. It was not hers, but hid its unseen cause. Then rushing came its vast, fearful fount, a formless dread with shapeless, endless wings, filling the universe with its dangerous breath. A denser darkness than the night could bear enveloped the heavens and possessed the earth. A rolling surge of silent death. It came curving round the far edge of the quaking globe, effacing heaven with its enormous stride. It willed to expunge the choked and anguished air, and end the fable of the joy of life. It seemed her very being to forbid, abolishing all by which her nature lived, and labored to blot out her body and soul. A clutch of some half-seen, invisible, an ocean of terror and sovereign might, a person and a black infinity. It seemed to cry without thought or word the message of its dark eternity and the awful meaning of its silences out of some sullen, monstrous, vast arisen, out of an abysmal deep of grief and fear, imagined by some blind, regardless self, a consciousness of being without its joy, empty of thought, incapable of bliss, that left life blank and nowhere found a soul, a voice to the dumb anguish of the heart, conveyed a stark sense of unspoken words. In her own depths, she heard the unuttered thought that made unreal the world and all life meant. Who art thou who claimest thy crown of separate birth, the illusion of thy soul's reality and personal Godhead on an ignorant globe, in the animal body of imperfect man? Hope not to be happy in a world of pain, and dream not listening to the unspoken word, and dazzled by the inexpressible ray transcending the mute superconscious realm, to give a body to the unknowable, or for a sanction to thy heart's delight, to burden with bliss the silent still supreme, profaning its bare and formless sanctity, or call into thy chamber the divine, and sit with God, tasting a human joy. I have created all I devour. I am death and the dark, terrible mother of life. I am Kali black and naked in the world. I am Maya, and the universe is my cheat. I lay waste human happiness with my breath, and slay the will to live, the joy to be, that all may pass back into nothingness, and only abide the eternal and absolute. For only the blank eternal can be true. All else is shadow and flash in mind's bright glass, Mind hollow mirror, in which ignorance sees a splendid figure of its own false self, and dreams it sees a glorious solid world, O soul, inventor of man's thoughts and hopes, thyself the invention of the moment's stream, illusion center or subtle apex point, at last know thyself, from vain existence cease. Close inverted comma. So here this is what this, when Savitri sees below this abysmal darkness, this dread that comes and then comes in a figure that completely overshadows the entire earth and almost feels like it's swallowing her entire being up, including, the whole treacherous air and so on. This being then comes in front of her, this awful dread, and then speaks to her and starts. There we started it, who art thou that claimest thy crown of separate birth, the illusion of thy soul's reality and personal Godhead on an ignorant globe? And so on, and then ends saying, I am death and the dark, terrible mother of life. I have created all I devour. And then it says in the end, O soul, inventor of man's thoughts and hopes, thyself the invention of the moment's stream, illusion center or subtle apex point, at last know thyself, from vain existence cease, a shadow of the negating absolute, that the intolerant darkness travelled surging past and ebbed in her the formidable voice. So this voice that spoke to Savitri was a shadow of the negating absolute. An intolerant darkness travelled surging past and ebbed in her the formidable voice. Slowly that formidable voice started ebbing, that is going down. It left behind her inner world laid waste. So when this voice ebbed, behind her inner world, which she had just seen these glimpses, this golden future, this golden you can say, a promise, suddenly it laid waste, completely destroyed her inner world. It left behind her inner world laid waste. A barren silence weighed upon her heart. Her kingdom of delight was there no more. Only her soul remained, its emptied stage, awaiting the unknown eternal will. Then from the heights, a greater voice came down, the word that touches the heart and finds the soul, the voice of light after the voice of night. The cry of the abyss drew heaven's reply. A might of storm chased by the might of the sun. So this voice of light speaks to Savitri after the voice of night has spoken. We start with quotation marks, and this is what the voice tells her. O soul, bear not thy kingdom to the foe. Consent to hide thy royalty of bliss, lest time and fate find out its avenues and beat with thunderous knock upon thy gates. Hide whilst thou canst thy treasure of separate self behind the luminous rampart of thy depths, till of a vaster empire it grows part. But not for self alone the self is won. Content abide not with one conquered realm. Adventure all to make the whole world thine. To break into greater kingdoms, turn thy force. Fear not to be nothing, that thou mayst be all. Ascend to the emptiness of the Supreme, that all in thee may reach its absolute. Accept to be small and human on the earth, interrupting thy newborn divinity, that man may find his utter self in God. So this is what this voice of light is saying, that don't go into the nirvanic bliss of the absolute. Don't go into the all-negating absolute, but consent to be small on earth. Consent to be human on earth, so that you can, by your example, turn man and help man to find his utter self in God. Fear not to be nothing, that thou mayst be all, and so on. So this voice is speaking to Savitri. If for thy own sake only thou hast come, an immortal spirit into the mortal's world, to found thy luminous kingdom in God's dark, in the inconscience realm, one shining star, one door in the ignorance opened upon light, why hadst thou any need to come at all? So this voice is reminding Savitri, if you've only come for yourself, for your own moksha, for your own nirvanic bliss, for your own realization, for your own mukti, then why did you come at all? Because you are yourself the immortal. You are the divine. You had no need to take this birth. You have not come just for yourself. So, this is what this voice is reminding Savitri. If for thy own sake only thou hast come, an immortal spirit into the mortal's world, to found thy luminous kingdom in God's dark, in the inconscience realm one shining star, one door in the ignorance opened upon light, why hadst thou any need to come at all? Thou hast come down into a struggling world to aid a blind and suffering mortal race, to open to light the eyes that could not see, to bring down bliss into the heart of grief, to make thy life a bridge twixt earth and heaven. If thou wouldst save the toiling universe, the vast universal suffering feel as thine, thou must bear the sorrow that thou claimest to heal. The daybringer must walk in darkest night. So here again the voice is speaking to Savitri. This is her own highest divine voice that speaks to her and says, if you have come down to help the struggling world, which is suffering and blind, and open its eyes, then that is your mission, to make your life a bridge between earth and heaven. So you are the bridge that can lead humanity from earth and suffering and ignorance and blindness to the heaven, to the light. If thou would save the toiling, if you want to save this suffering, toiling universe, the vast universal suffering feel as thine, you must feel and go through this terrible universal suffering. You must feel it as your own. You must experience it. And you must bear the sorrow that you have to heal. You can't heal something unless you have experienced it, borne it, suffered it, felt it. You have to feel it. The one that the daybringer, the one that brings the day, must have first walked in darkest night. He who would save the world must share its pain. Now this is the important mantric point. That is why the mother, when she came, she bore the pain and suffering of every creature on earth. Animals, plants, beings, Sri Aurobindo did, sadhaks. So unless you can share the pain, if you want to save the world, he who would save the world, you cannot save the world unless you share its pain. This is what this voice is reminding Savitri. So you can go into this nirvanic bliss, but then you won't be able to save the world. This all-negating absolute, you will have your own nirvanic salvation, your own moksha, but you won't be able to save this suffering world, or humanity will be just as it was. So, this very important line, he who would save the world must share its pain. If he knows not grief, how shall he find grief's cure? If you don't know grief, if you've never experienced grief, how will you find the remedy, the cure of grief? If far he walks above mortality's head, how shall the mortal reach that too high path? If one of theirs they see scale heaven's peaks, men then can hope to learn that Titan climb. But if human beings see one of themselves that looks like them, bears the same nature, same human frailties, climbing the highest peaks, then they can also hope that if she can do it, if he can do it, then I can also begin to find and climb to the highest peaks of Godhead. If one of theirs they see scale heaven's peaks, men then can hope to learn that Titan climb. God must be born on earth and be as man, that man being human may grow even as God. So this is the importance and the reason of Avatarhood. Why do we have avatars coming? Why was it necessary for Sri Rama, Sri Krishna, Buddha, Sri Aurobindo, the Mother, and several avatars? Why was it necessary for these great beings who were godlike in their consciousness to come down on earth? This is the reason. He who would save the world must be one with the world. All suffering things contain in his heart's space and bear the grief and joy of all that lives. His soul must be wider than the universe and feel eternity as its very stuff, rejecting the moment's personality, know itself older than the birth of time, creation, and incident in its consciousness. Arcturus and Belphegor, grains of fire, circling in a corner of its boundless self, the world's destruction, a small transient storm, in the calm infinity it has become. God must be born on earth and be as man, that man being human may grow even as God. This is extremely important and explains the concept of avatarhood on earth. And he who would save the world must be one with the world. So this is what this voice is telling Savitri. If thou wouldst a little loosen the vast chain, draw back from the world that the idea has made, thy mind's selection from the infinite, thy senses' gloss on the infinitesimals dance, then shalt thou know how the great bondage came. Banish all thought from thee. So here the voice is again explaining to Savitri what to do. Banish all thought from thee and be God's void. Be empty so that the divine can fill this void in you. Get rid of all thought. Then shalt thou uncover the unknowable and the superconscient. Conscious grow on thy tops. Infinity's vision through thy gaze shall pierce. Thou shalt look into the eyes of the unknown, find the hid truths and things seen null and false. Behind things known, discover mysteries rare. Thou shalt be one with God's bare reality and the miraculous world he has become, and the diviner miracle still to be, when nature who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal's light. So this is what will happen when you do this. Nature who is now unconscious God, is unconscious. Nature is unconscious of its Godhead, unconscious of its divinity, will become translucent and grow into the eternal's light. So when you begin to do this, when you banish all thought, when you become God's void, when you allow the superconscient to grow conscious in yourself, then these things will happen. Then you shall look into the eyes of the unknown, find the hid truth in things, and so on. When nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal's light, her seeing, his sight, her walk, his steps of power, and life is filled with the spiritual joy, and matter is the Spirit's willing bride. Consent to be nothing and none. Dissolve time's work. So this is the voice that is telling Savitri. Consent to be nothing and none. Dissolve time's work. Cast off thy mind. Step back from form and name. Annul thyself, that only God may be. Extremely important. This mantra that this voice of light gives Savitri, annul thyself. What does annul thyself mean? That is, in one sense, annul the ego, annul the mind, the thought. Annul thyself that only God may be. And only if you're empty of yourself and your own personality and your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own feelings and your own sanskaras can you allow the divine to enter into you. But also, when you can annul yourself, can you surrender to the divine. So this absolute surrender can only take place when the divine enters your consciousness, when the ego is completely annulled, disappears. Annul thyself, that only God may be. Here the voice stops, end of the quotation marks. Thus spoke the mighty and uplifting voice, and Savitri heard. She bowed her head and mused, plunging her deep regard into herself, in her soul's privacy, in the silent night, aloof and standing back detached and calm, a witness of the drama of herself, a student of her own interior scene. She watched the passion and toil of life and heard in the crowded thoroughfares of mind the unceasing tread and passage of her thoughts. All she allowed to rise that chose to stir, calling, compelling note, forbidding note, she left all to the process formed in time and the free initiative of nature's will. Thus, following the complex human play, she heard the prompter's voice behind the scenes, perceived the original libretto's set and the organ theme of the composer force. All she beheld that surges from man's depths, the animal instincts prowling mid life's trees, the impulses that whisper to the heart, and passion's thunder chase sweeping the nerves. She saw the powers that stare from the abyss, and the wordless light that liberates the soul. But most her gaze pursued the birth of thought. Affranchised from the look of surface mind, she paused not to survey the official case, the issue of forms from the office of the brain, its factory of thought sounds and soundless words, and voices stored within unheard by men, its mint and treasury of shining coin. These were but counters in mind's symbol game, a gramophone's discs, a reproduction's film, a list of signs, a cipher and a code. In our unseen subtle body, thought is born. Here, Sri Aurobindo, as the narrator explains, the birth of thought. If you have to annul all thought, you must understand how thought is born. Where does thought originate from? Then only can you annul all thought. In our unseen subtle body, thought is born, or there it enters from the cosmic field. Oft from her soul stepped out a naked thought, luminous with mysteried lips and wonderful eyes. Or from her heart emerged some burning face, and looked for life and love and passionate truth, aspired to heaven, or embraced the world, or led the fancy like a fleeting moon across the dull sky of man's common days, amidst the doubtful certitudes of earth's law, to the celestial beauty of faith gave form, as if at flower prints in a dingy room, laughed in a golden vase one living rose. A thaumaturgist sat in her heart's deep, compelled the forward stride, the upward look, till wonder leaped into the illumined breast, and life grew marvelous with transfiguring hope. A seeing will pondered between the brows, thoughts glistening angels stood behind the brain, in flashing armor, folding hands of prayer, and poured heaven's rays into the earthly form. Imaginations flamed up from her breast, unearthly beauty, touches of surpassing joy, and plans of miracle, dreams of delight, around her navel lotus clustering close. Her large sensations of the teeming worlds streamed their dumb movements of the unformed idea, invading the small, sensitive flower of the throat. They brought their mute, unuttered resonances to kindle the figures of a heavenly speech. So here you can see that every center of Savitri, all the psychological centers were being opened. The Muladhara, the Swadhisthana, the Anahat Chakra, and so on. So each one was opening up, and in each one she was seeing the truth, the true form, the true thought, the true force that was emanating. Her large sensations of the teeming worlds streamed their dumb movements of the unformed idea, invading the small sensitive flower of the throat. They brought their mute unuttered resonances to kindle the figures of a heavenly speech. Below, desires formed their wordless wish, and longings of physical sweetness and ecstasy translated into the accents of a cry, their grasp on objects and their clasp on souls. Her body's thoughts climbed from her conscious limbs and carried their yearnings to its mystic crown, where nature's murmurs meet the ineffable. So, Savitri became the witness of herself and saw how thought translated in each chakra, in each center of her being in different forms. And she witnessed that, and she began to become aware of that. Only when you become aware of that can you master it. Her body's thoughts climbed from her conscious limbs. So this is the physical mind, her body's thoughts. Her body's thoughts climbed from her conscious limbs and carried their yearnings to its mystic crown, where nature's murmurs meet the ineffable. But for the mortal, prisoned in outward mind, all must present their passports at its door. Disguised, they must don the official cap and mask, or pass as manufacturers of the brain. Unknown their secret truth and hidden source. Only to the inner mind they speak direct, put on a body and assume a voice. Their passage seen, their message heard and known, their birthplace and their natal mark revealed, and stand confessed to an immortal sight, are nature's messengers to the witness soul. Impenetrable, withheld from mortal sense, the inner chambers of the Spirit's house disclose to her their happenings and their guess. So impenetrable, withheld from mortal sense, which the normal mortal, our senses, our five senses cannot know about. The inner chambers of Savitri's Spirit's house, the inner chambers of her psychic being opened, disclosed to her their happenings and their guests, all the inner being. So the inner mind, the inner vital, the true mind, the true vital, the true physical being, the psychic, the inner chambers of Savitri's being opened and disclosed to her their happenings and their guests. Eyes looked through crevices in the invisible wall and through the secrecy of unseen doors. There came into mind's little frontal room thoughts that enlarged our limited human range. There came into the mind's little frontal room thoughts that enlarged our limited human range, lifted the ideal's half-quenched or sinking torch, or peered through the finite at the infinite. A sight opened upon the invisible, and sense the shapes that mortal eyes see not, the sounds that mortal listening cannot hear, the blissful sweetness of the intangible's touch, the objects that to us are empty air, are there the stuff of daily experience, and the common pabulum of sense and thought. So this, again, what happened in Savitri was that her inner subtle side opened up, the third eye. And from there, she could see the shapes that we cannot see, the sounds that we cannot hear, the blissful sweetness of the intangible's touch. The objects that to us are empty air were actually full of the stuff of daily experience. And she could see what human sight could not see, and the common pabulum of sense and thought. The beings of the subtle realms appeared. All these beings of the subtle realms appeared before Savitri. And scenes concealed behind our earthly scene. And those scenes that are behind the outer earthly scenes, that actually govern the earthly scenes, that are actually determining them, those came in front. And scenes concealed behind our earthly scene, she saw the life of remote continents, and distance deafened not to voices far. So she saw the life of remote continents, and even this far distance did not make the sound deaf. She could hear those sounds and those scenes, and she could see and hear, even though it was million miles away. So that did not stop the sounds coming to her. Distance did not stop that. She saw the life of remote continents, and distance deafened not to voices far. She felt the movements crossing unknown minds. The past's events occurred before her eyes. So the past event, all of the past, Trikala Drishti, past events occurred before her eyes. The great world's thoughts were part of her own thought. So even the world's thoughts, the universal nature's thoughts, were part of her own thought. The great world's thoughts were part of her own thought, and this happened because Savitri had annulled her own thoughts, annulled her own self, annulled her own ego. The great world's thoughts were part of her own thought, the feelings dumb forever and unshared, the ideas that never found an utterance. The dim subconscious incoherent hints laid bare, a meaning twisted, deep and strange, the bizarre secret of their fumbling speech, their links with underlying reality. The unseen grew visible and audible. So all that was unseen grew visible and audible to Savitri. Thoughts leaped down from a superconscient field, like eagles swooping from a viewless peak. Thoughts gleaned up from the screened subliminal depths, like golden fishes from a hidden sea. This world is a vast, unbroken totality. A deep solidarity joins its contrary paths. God's summits look back on the mute abyss. So, man evolving to divinest heights, colloque still with the animal and the jinn. The human Godhead with stargazer eyes lives still in one house with the primal beast. The high meets the low, all is a single plan. So she beheld the many births of thought, if births can be of what eternal is. For the eternal's powers are like himself, timeless in the timeless, in time ever born. This too she saw, that all in outer mind is made, not born, a product perishable, forged in the body's factory by earth force. This mind is a dynamic small machine, producing ceaselessly till it wears out, with raw material drawn from the outside world, the pattern sketched out by an artist god. Often our thoughts are finished cosmic wares, admitted by a silent office gate and passed through the subconscious galleries, then issued in time's mart as private make. So here the narrator, Sri Aurobindo, is remarking that he's explaining to us the nature of thought. The thought that we get through the outer mind, through the outer brain, is most often forged. It is not pre-made. It is created by the outer consciousness and outer mind. And what it does is it takes the raw material from the outside world, and our thoughts are often finished cosmic wares. They come from one mind to another mind, from one place to another place. They are actually moving around, admitted by a silent office gate and passed through the subconscious gallery, then issued in time's market as private make. So we think it's our thought. We think it's our feeling. We think we are the originator of this thought, but actually it's moving around the universe. And because we have no sentinel, we don't have a guard, we are not conscious of which thought is coming in, what to reject, what to accept. We accept it and then start vibrating with that thought pattern. So then, issued in time's mart as private make, for now they bear the living person stamp, a trick, a special hue, claims them his own. So by a special trick or a hue, one feels, each of us feels, these are my thoughts. I am thinking this way. I am feeling this way. But they're actually not. For now they bear the living person stamp, a trick, a special hue, claims them his own. All else is nature's craft, and this too hers. Our tasks are given. We are but instruments. Nothing is all our own that we create. Very important. Nothing is all our own that we create. We are like instruments. We are like the fork and the knife that you pick up to eat. The fork and knife can't say that I have created this food that I'm eating, or that I am eating. It is only an instrument. Something else is eating. You understand? In the same way, your mind is the same. You have not created these thoughts, and that is why you can detach from them, and you can become conscious of the thoughts you want, and you can annul yourself, and you can be open to a higher thought process, from a deeper thought process, which comes from a higher plane, not from the outer mind, which is swirling around in the universe. Why? Because you are an instrument and not the creator. For now they bear the living person stamp, a trick, a special hue, claims them his own. All else is nature's craft, and this too hers. Our tasks are given. We are but instruments. Nothing is all our own that we create. The power that acts in us is not our force. The genius too receives from some high fount, concealed in a supernal secrecy, the work that gives him an immortal name. So even the genius, an Einstein, or all the scientists and the poets and the creators, they also are not creators. They receive from some high fountain of this inspiration, and the whole thing comes down. Only thing, why they're called geniuses? Because they can open their mind. They can receive in stillness. They're attuned towards this higher receiving. They can become channels. So Sri Aurobindo also said, I only brought down Savitri. He didn't create Savitri. He just was able to open his mind and his consciousness to the highest overmental, supramental region, and there the words of Savitri and the vision of the plane of Savitri came to him, and he recited it out. Now that itself requires a great genius and a great consciousness to be able to do that. So, the power that acts in us is not our force. The genius too receives from some high fount. So therefore when you feel depressed, Or when you say, oh, what is going to happen? Or you get stressed out. Or you have anxiety. Or you have all these feelings of inferiority and superiority and whatever you have. Please detach yourself from these. These are not yours. You have opened yourself to a very low plane of consciousness. Go up, not horizontal. Try and become silent and reject and understand these things come from outside. You are like a vibrating instrument. So it's like a tanpura. If a bad player plays a tanpura, you will get a discordant sound. If a supreme musician plays the tanpura, or a sitar, you will get a different sound. Somebody who doesn't know how to play a sitar will not be able to play it properly, and will therefore the instrument is not to be blamed. It is what the instrument, the player, who is not able to perceive and go to a higher fount. That's why geniuses are geniuses, because they can receive from higher planes of consciousness. And we must learn to do that. We must therefore reject, Mother says, all thoughts that are not in line with our aspiration, all feelings that are not in line with our dharma or our aspiration in life or our goal in life. And this rejection is extremely important. And you can only reject when you understand in your mind that it is not you, it is not yours, it is you're receiving from a swirling universe of influences and ideas and thoughts and wrong suggestions. If you go high up, you will receive a deeper and a much greater light and wisdom and consciousness and harmony and love and bliss and thought that is of the highest order. This is something you have to learn to do. All stress can be gotten rid of by this simple technique. Our tasks are given. We are but instruments. Nothing is all our own that we create. The power that acts in us is not our force. The genius too receives from some high fount, concealed in a supernal secrecy, the work that gives him an immortal name. The word, the form, the charm, the glory and grace are missioned sparks from a stupendous fire, a sample from the laboratory of God, of which he holds the patent upon earth, comes to him wrapped in golden coverings. He listens for inspiration's postman knock and takes delivery of the priceless gift, a little spoilt by the receiver mind or mixed with the manufacture of his brain. When least defaced, then is it most divine. So here very clearly the whole process is described by Sri Aurobindo of how this immortal power, this great power also is what inspires geniuses, and they too receive from some high fount of inspiration, and that work they give their own name to, which has actually come from a higher plane and force. He listens for inspiration's postman knock. So this is inspiration with a capital I, which comes from a high plane of intuition, inspiration, from the higher planes of the mind. And genius takes delivery of the priceless gift that comes down into the mind, which is most often spoilt by the receiver's mind, because our human mind is still very rudimentary. So it spoils that highest pure inspiration. However, because it comes from such a high plane, something of this greatness comes down. When least defaced, then is it most divine. Although his ego claims the world for its use, man is a dynamo for the cosmic work. So although our ego claims the entire world for our own use and we are the center of the universe, man is a dynamo, is like a generator for the cosmic work. Nature does most in him, God the high rest. Nature does most in him, God the high rest. So the ego plays very little part in actually any kind of creation. It is nature the higher nature, and then the divine that does the most. Only his soul's acceptance is his own. This independent, once a power supreme, self-born before the universe was made, accepting cosmos, binds himself nature's serf till he becomes her freedman or God's slave. So this soul, that he has only one free choice, to either accept his soul or to refuse it. But this soul, once a power supreme, is self-born. He decides to get born, takes a decision to be born in the universe in a body, mind and vital, accepting cosmos. And when he gets born, he binds himself as nature's slave, serf, till he becomes her freedman or God's slave. So until he becomes free, he is nature's slave or God's slave. He either becomes free or he becomes God's slave. But the only way to become God's slave is to be free of nature, which he cannot do until he finds his soul. And that is the only choice given to man, to find his soul or to refuse to find your soul. This is the appearance in our mortal front. Our greater truth of being lies behind. So this is the appearance in our mortal front. Our greater truth of being lies behind, it's not in front. Our consciousness is cosmic and immense, but because it's not in front, it gives an appearance of the ego and nature. Our consciousness is cosmic and immense, but only when we break through matter's wall, in that spiritual vastness, can we stand, where we can live the masters of our world, and mind is only a means and body a tool. For above the birth of body and of thought, our spirit's truth lives in the naked self. For above the birth of body and of thought, our spirit's truth lives in the naked self. And from that height, unbound, surveys the world. Out of the mind she rose to escape its law, that it might sleep in some deep shadow of self, or fall silent in the silence of the unseen. High she attained, and stood from nature free, and saw creation's life from far above. Thence upon all she laid her sovereign will, to dedicate it to God's timeless calm. Then all grew tranquil in her being's space. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool, when a stray stone disturbs its dreaming rest. So out of the mind she rose to escape its law. Who rose? Savitri. That it might sleep in some deep shadow of self. Who might sleep? The mind, or fall silent in the silence of the unseen. High she attained and stood from nature free, and saw creation's life from far above. Thence upon all she laid her sovereign will, to dedicate it to God's timeless calm. Then all grew tranquil in her being's space. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell. So Savitri's mind, here she has complete silence of mind. She achieves that. This is, she goes into this nirvanic condition. She has the experience of complete and absolute silence in the nirvanic consciousness. And it's a wonderful description of that. Then all grew tranquil in her being's space. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool, when a stray stone disturbs its dreaming rest. Yet the mind's factory had ceased to work. There was no sound of the dynamo's throb. The most difficult thing to do is to stop the noise of the mind. The noise of the mind is the most difficult thing to stop. And that is what Savitri has achieved here. Yet the mind's factory had ceased to work. There was no sound of the dynamo's throb. There came no call from the still fields of life. So neither were there any calls from the vital, from the still fields of the life planes, neither was the mind active. All had ceased in Savitri's being. Yet the mind's factory had ceased to work. There was no sound of the dynamo's throb. There came no call from the still fields of life. Then even those stirrings rose in her no more. Then even that stopped. The small, slight, quiet waves of thoughts, even that slowly, that stirring rose no more. Even those stirrings rose in her no more. Her mind now seemed like a vast, empty room. So her mind became a vast, empty room, or like a peaceful landscape without sound. This men call quietude and prize as peace, but to her deeper sight, all yet was there, effervescing like a chaos under a lid. Feelings and thoughts cried out for word and act, but found no response in the silenced brain. So this is what everybody's aspiring. This is what traditional yoga, Nirvana, is meant to be, the highest spiritual experience. But when Savitri reaches this nirvanic state of consciousness, she actually finds that this is not as it seems to be. Her deeper sight shows her that behind it, even though her mind is absolutely quiet and empty, but to her deeper sight, all yet was there. So, but to her deeper sight, all yet was there. That means the chaos, the sound was still present, but it was not coming into her mind, it was outside the mind. Feelings and thoughts cried out for word and act, but found no response in the silenced brain. All was suppressed, but nothing yet expunged. At every moment might explosion come. So that is why in the traditional yoga, those who have reached this state of complete peace and quietude and bliss, they cannot come back into the world. Because if they enter into sansaric jivan, into the world life, they will find that all of this wonderful peace and bliss that they have experienced disappears and the old world comes, because it is the mind that has turned silent. It is not the body or the vital that is transformed. There is no transformation that has taken place. And that is what Savitri realizes, that the tradition, that yoga, even the experience of nirvana, which is the highest experience, is a kind of extinction. It is not a transformation or a fulfillment. And that is what she sees when she goes there. When her consciousness experiences that and her mind becomes totally silent. This is very, very important. This men call quietude and prize as peace. But to her deeper sight all yet was there, effervescing like a chaos under a lid. Feelings and thoughts cried out for word and act, but found no response in the silenced brain. All was suppressed, but nothing yet expunged. At every moment might explosion come. Then this too paused. The body seemed a stone. So she realized that there was only a kind of suppression. At any moment this whole thing could, like an explosion, burst. Thoughts, the vital feelings and so on. However, after some time in this plane, then her mind, this too paused. What paused? These thoughts and the vital life forces, they all paused. And then what happened? Then this too paused. The body seemed a stone. All now was a wide, mighty vacancy, but still excluded from eternity's hush. For still was far the repose of the Absolute, and the ocean silence of infinity. Even now some thoughts could cross her solitude. These surged not from the depths or from within, cast up from formlessness to seek a form. Spoke not the body's need, nor voiced life's call. There seemed not born nor made in human time. These thoughts seemed not born nor made in human time. They did not come from her body or her mind or her vital. Yet some thoughts were still crossing through her vast, quiet solitude. Spoke not the body's need, nor voiced life's call. These seemed not born, nor made in human time. Children of cosmic nature from a far world, ideas, shapes, in complete armor of words, posted like travelers in an alien space. Out of some far expanse they seemed to come, as if carried on vast wings like large white sails, and with easy access reached the inner ear, as though they used a natural privileged right to the high royal entries of the soul. So some of these thoughts still crossed over, but they did not come from her. They came from some outside subliminal consciousness and entered within. So out of some far expanse they seemed to come, as if carried on vast wings like large white sails, and with easy access reached the inner ear, as though they used a natural privileged right to the high royal entries of the soul. As yet their path lay deep concealed in light. Then, looking to know whence the intruders came, she saw a spiritual immensity pervading and encompassing the world space. As ether are transparent, tangible air, and through it sailing tranquilly a thought. So when she turned to see where this thought came from, and she looked to find it, she saw. Then looking to know whence the intruders came, she saw a spiritual immensity pervading and encompassing the world space. As ether are transparent, tangible air. Like our air, we only see the air, but actually pervading the air is ether, this fourth substance. In the same way, pervading the whole world space of thought and mind was this spiritual immensity. And through it sailing tranquilly a thought, as smoothly glides a ship nearing its port, ignorant of embargo and blockade, confident of entrance and the visa's seal. It came to the silent city of the brain, towards its accustomed and expectant way, but met a barring will, a blow of force, and sank vanishing in the immensity. So it came there expecting that it will enter because it's used to entrance, but found in Savitri an embargo and blockade because her mind was not allowing any thought to enter. However, but met a barring will, a blow of force, and sank vanishing in the immensity. So this thought went back to where it came from. After a long vacant pause, another thought appeared, and others one by one suddenly emerged. Minds unexpected visitors from the unseen. So these thoughts were not being manufactured in Savitri's brain or even in her consciousness. These were coming from some far off immensity, like travelers who always got entry. Nobody could ever stop them because nobody could see where they were coming from. But Savitri had already silenced her mind completely and could see these thoughts and was looking for the origin from which these thoughts came from. And then she saw that they came from some vast immensity. And then when she refused to allow them entry into her mind, sank back into that immensity. After a long vacant pause, another appeared, and others one by one suddenly emerged. Minds unexpected visitors from the unseen, like far-off sails upon a lonely sea. But soon that commerce failed. None reached mind's coast. Her mind was completely silent. So all this commerce of these thoughts could not enter and went back. Then what happened? Savitri's mind. Then all grew still. Nothing moved anymore. Immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary, a silent spirit pervaded silent space. So immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary, a silent spirit pervaded silent space. In that absolute stillness, bare and formidable, there was glimpsed an all-negating void supreme. And then when this happened, when the entire being, even these thoughts stopped, and everything stopped, it was like a silent spirit pervading silent space. And at that time, in that absolute stillness, bare and formidable, she glimpsed an all-negating void supreme. A void supreme, but all-negating, that claimed its mystic nihil's sovereign right to cancel nature. And what was its sovereign right? The mystic nihil's sovereign right to cancel nature and deny the soul. Even the nude sense of self grew pale and thin. Impersonal, signless, featureless, void of forms, a blank, pure consciousness had replaced the mind. Her spirit seemed the substance of a name, the world a pictured symbol drawn on self. A dream of images, a dream of sounds, built up the semblance of a universe, or lent to spirit the appearance of a world. So a blank, pure consciousness completely replaced the mind. Her spirit, Savitri's spirit, seemed the substance of a name, and the world a pictured symbol drawn on self. A dream of images, a dream of sounds, built up the semblance of a universe, or lent to spirit the appearance of a world. This was self-seeing, could see itself. In that intolerant hush, no notion and no concept could take shape. There was no sense to frame the figure of things. There was no sense, all the senses, sensorial, there was no sense to frame the figure of things. A sheer self-sight was there. No thought arose. So even for thought to rise, it has to go through some medium. But there were no senses. It was only a self-sight. It was self-seeing, a sight that was within itself. And therefore there was no sense to frame the figure of things. A sheer self-sight was there. No thought arose. Emotion slept deep down in the still heart, or lay buried in a cemetery of peace. So even emotion lay buried like a dead lies in the cemetery. Emotion lay buried in a cemetery of what? Of peace. So such was the experience, such was the consciousness that Savitri had gained. That's why it's called Nirvana and the all-negating absolute. Everything was neti, nihil. There was no sense to frame the figure of things. A sheer self-sight was there, no thought arose. Emotion slept deep down in the still heart, or lay buried in a cemetery of peace. All feelings seemed quiescent, calm or dead, as if the heart strings rent could work no more, and joy and grief could never rise again. The heart beat on with an unconscious rhythm, but no response came from it, and no cry. So here, the heart beat on mechanically, like with an unconscious rhythm, but no response came from it, and no cry. Vain was the provocation of events. So even if whatever happened outside, nothing could disturb it. The peace within, and the calm and the silence and the absolute negation of everything. All feelings seemed quiescent, calm or dead, as if the heartstrings rent could work no more, and joy and grief could never rise again. The heart beat on with an unconscious rhythm, but no response came from it, and no cry. Vain was the provocation of events. Nothing within answered an outside touch. No nerve was stirred, and no reaction rose. Yet still her body saw and moved and spoke. So while all this was happening, yet her body saw, because there was a self-sight, and moved and spoke. It understood without the aid of thought. It said whatever needed to be said. It did whatever needed to be done. There was no person there behind the act, no mind that chose or passed the fitting word. All wrought like an unerring, apt machine, as if continuing old habitual turns, and pushed by an old unexhausted force, the engine did the work for which it was made. Her consciousness looked on and took no part. All it upheld, in nothing had a share. There was no strong initiator will. An incoherence, crossing a firm void, slipped into an order of related chance. A pure perception was her only power, that stood behind her action and her sight. If that retired, all objects would be extinct. So there was only a pure perception, was the only power that stood behind her action and her sight. If that retired, all objects would be extinct. Her private universe would cease to be. The house she had built with bricks of thought and sense, in the beginning, after the birth of space, this seeing was identical with the seen. So what was being seen was identical with what saw. You understand? The house she had built with bricks of thought and sense, in the beginning, after the birth of space, this seeing was identical with the seen. It knew without knowledge all that could be known. It knew without knowledge all that could be known. It saw impartially the world go by, but in the same supine, unmoving glance, saw too its abysmal unreality. It watched the figure of the cosmic game, but the thought and the inner life and forms seemed dead, abolished by her own collapse of thought. A hollow physical shell persisted still. All seemed a brilliant shadow of itself, a cosmic film of scenes and images. The enduring mass and outline of the hills was a design sketched on a silent mind and held to a tremulous false solidity like constant beats of visionary sight. So it was like a hollow physical shell persisted still. It was like seeing a film on cellulite that was not real, that did not have any substance. And the whole world she saw like that. All beings and all forms and everything were to her sight like a film, like a brilliant shadow of itself, a cosmic film of scenes and images. The enduring mass and outline of the hills was a design sketched on a silent mind and held to a tremulous false solidity by constant beats of visionary sight. The forest, with its emerald multitudes, clothed with its show of hues, a vague empty space, a painting's colours hiding a surface void that flickered upon disillusion's edge, the blue heavens, an illusion of the eyes, roofed in the mind's illusion of a world. The men who walked beneath an unreal sky seemed mobile puppets out of cardboard cut and pushed by unseen hands across the soil, or moving pictures upon fancy's film. With this consciousness, everything in the world appeared to her as though it was some sort of an illusion. And there was, mobile puppets. Even the men who walked beneath this unreal sky of blue seemed like mobile puppets out of cardboard cut and pushed by unseen hands across the soil, or moving pictures upon fancy's film. There was no soul within, no power of life. The brain's vibrations that appear like thought, the nerve's brief answer to each contact's knock, the heart's quiverings felt as joy and grief and love, were twitchings of the body, their seeming self, that body forged from atoms and from gas, a manufactured lie of Maya's make, its life a dream seen by the sleeping void. So that body forged from atoms and from gas, a manufactured lie of Maya's make, its life a dream seen by the sleeping void. The animals lone or trooping through the glades fled like a passing vision of beauty and grace, imagined by some all-creating eye. Yet nothing was there. Behind the fading scene. Wherever she turned, at whatever she looked, it was perceived, yet hid from mind and sight. The one only real shut itself from space, and stood aloof from the idea of time. Its truth escaped from shape and line and hue. All else grew unsubstantial, self-annulled. This only everlasting seemed, and true. Yet nowhere dwelt. It was outside the hours. This only could justify the labor of sight, but sight could not define for it a form. This only could appease the unsatisfied ear, but hearing listened in vain for a missing sound. This answered not the sense, called not to mind. It met her as the uncaught, inaudible voice. It met her as the uncaught, inaudible voice that sparks forever from the unknowable. It met her like an omnipresent point, pure of dimensions, unfixed, invisible, the single oneness of its multiplied beat, accentuating its sole eternity. It faced her as some vast naught's immensity, an endless no to all that seems to be, an endless yes to things ever unconceived, and all that is unimagined and unthought, an eternal zero or untotaled aught. So this consciousness, pure of dimensions, unfixed, invisible, the single oneness of its multiplied beat, met her, it faced her, some vast naught's immensity, an endless no to all that seems to be, an endless yes to things ever unconceived that have never been, and all that is unimagined and unthought, an eternal zero or untotaled aught, a spaceless and a placeless infinite. Yet eternity and infinity seemed but words vainly affixed by mind's incompetence to its stupendous lone reality. The world is but a spark burst from its light. All moments flashes from its timelessness, all objects glimmerings of the bodiless that disappear from mind when that is seen. It held as if a shield before its face, a consciousness that saw without a seer the truth where knowledge is not, nor knower, nor known, the love enamored of its own delight, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved, bringing their personal passion into the vast, the force omnipotent, in quietude, the bliss that none can ever hope to taste. So this is the kind of experience that Savitri is having in the plane of the all-negating absolute or the Nirvana, Nirvanic consciousness. It is a full description that Sri Aurobindo makes here of what we know as the yoga of negation, that is moksha, nirvana, what Buddha attained. This is the all-negating absolute. This is why Buddha and Shankara and so many said that this world is maya, it's illusion, because after this experience the whole world appeared to be something that was an illusion created by this consciousness, and absolute and the omnipotent seemed to be outside of this world, not inside it. Matter had to be therefore rejected. Therefore this whole idea of asceticism came into the yoga, of leaving world and going into the mountains or going into some sort of solitude. Okay. It held as if a shield before its face, a consciousness that saw without a seer, the truth where knowledge is not, nor knower nor known, the love enamored of its own delight, in which the lover is not, nor the beloved, bringing their personal passion into the vast, the force omnipotent in quietude. the bliss that none can ever hope to taste. It cancelled the convincing cheat of self. A truth in nothingness was its mighty clue. If all existence could renounce to be, and being take refuge in non-being's arms, and non-being could strike out its ciphered round, some lustre of that reality might appear. So if all existence could renounce to be, if all sat, existence is life, is all existence, if that could renounce to be, that if that could return to nihil, and being take refuge in non-being's arms, and non-being strike out its ciphered round, then some lustre of that reality might appear. A formless liberation came on her. Once sepulchred, alive in brain and flesh, she had risen up from body, mind and life. She was no more a person in a world. She had escaped into infinity. So once this formless liberation is Nirvana, had come into Savitri, this consciousness and this full experience of Nirvana, then she felt as though she had risen up from both body, all three, body, mind and life, and she was no more a person. There was no capital P in the world. She had escaped into infinity, but once had been herself. What once had been herself had disappeared. There was no frame of things, no figure of soul. A refugee from the domain of sense itself, because there was no sense. The 5 senses or the 7 senses did not exist here. A refugee from the domain of sense, evading the necessity of thought, delivered from knowledge and from ignorance, and rescued from the true and the untrue. She shared the superconscious high retreat beyond the self-born word, the nude idea with a capital I, the first bare, solid ground of consciousness. So she was delivered from knowledge and from ignorance. She was rescued from the true and the untrue, and she shared the superconscious high retreat beyond the self-born word, beyond the word which is the word of creation, the nude idea, the first bare solid ground of consciousness. Beings were not there. The plane she was there were no beings. Beings were not there. Existence had no place. There was no temptation of the joy to be. So this was a place where there was only the all-negating nihil, the nirvana, where there was no beings, there was no existence, there was no temptation of the joy to be, no joy, no grief, nothing. Unutterably effaced, no one and null, a vanishing vestige like a violet trace, a faint record merely of a self now past. She was a point in the unknowable. So she became a point, one dot in the unknowable. She was a point in the unknowable. Only some last annulment now remained. An annihilation's vague, indefinable step. So there was only this last, she was already just a point, that dot remained, and that was the last annulment of that dot. And once that disappeared, there would be nothing. Annihilation's vague and indefinable step. A memory of being still was there. A memory that once there was a being, once there was a self. A memory of being still was there, and kept her separate from nothingness. And that is this memory of being is what kept her separate from complete nothingness. Otherwise that dot would have also become extinct and there would be nothingness. Annihilation's vague indefinable step. A memory of being still was there and kept her separate from nothingness. She was in that, but still became not that because of that memory. This shadow of herself, so close to naught, could be again self's point to be, to live. This little point, this little dot, so close to naught, could be also the same self point to live. That point only could help her to live again, to come back. Otherwise, if that dot was not there, she could not ever retrace back to beingness from non-being. could be again a self's point d'appui to live, return out of the inconceivable, and be what some mysterious vast might choose. Return out of the inconceivable, and be what some mysterious vast might choose. Even as the unknowable decreed, she might be naught, or new become the all. So when she returned, this point, this dot would help her to return to live, and return out of the inconceivable, and become what either some mysterious power of vast will choose for her. Even as the unknowable decreed, whatever that decree was, she might be naught again, she might again go back to naught, nothingness, or new become the all, or she might become more than naught, that is the all, the all, not the all-negating, but the all-affirming absolute. So she might become the all-negating absolute again, or she might go into the all-affirming absolute. So this was something that would only happen depending on what was decreed and what the all-mysterious vast might choose. This shadow of herself so close to naught could be again self's point d'appui to live, return out of the inconceivable, and be what some mysterious vast might choose. Even as the unknowable decreed, she might be naught or new become the all, or if the omnipotent nihil took a shape, emerge as someone and redeem the world. Or if the omnipotent nihil took a shape, emerge as someone and redeem the world. Even she might learn what the mystic cipher held. This seeming exit or closed end of all could be a blind, tenebrous passage screened from sight, her state the eclipsing shell of a darkened sun on its secret way to the ineffable. Even now, her splendid being might flame back out of the silence and the nullity, a gleaming portion of the all-wonderful, a power of some all-affirming absolute, a shining mirror of the eternal truth, to show to the one in all its manifest face, to the souls of men their deep identity. Or she might wake into God's quietude, beyond the cosmic day and cosmic night, and rest appeased in his white eternity. But this was now unreal or remote, or covered in the mystic, fathomless blank. In infinite nothingness was the ultimate sign. So what was the ultimate sign? In infinite nothingness was the ultimate sign, or else the real was the unknowable. A lonely absolute negated all. It effaced the ignorant world from its solitude and drowned the soul in its everlasting peace. End of Canto 6. So this all-negating absolute, it negated all and effaced the ignorant world from its solitude and drowned the soul in everlasting peace. So this experience of everlasting peace is what here she has. So this is, of course, we are reading the book of Yoga, and the next canto is Canto 7, the discovery of the cosmic spirit and the cosmic consciousness. Obviously, Savitri comes back.